have a rendezvous with death. We'll preserve the last best hope of man on earth, or we'll sentence them to take the last step into 1,000 years of darkness.
No fear. No political correctness. No wokeism. You're listening to Underground USA.
Thanks for downloading, listening, and sharing. My name is Frank Salvato, and you're spending a few moments in Underground USA. I'm going to start this podcast by offering a first-hand account of what's happening in the rural areas of North Carolina in the aftermath of Hurricane Helene. The devastation is much worse than being reported, much worse. A friend of this show, Judson Carroll, who hosts the Southern Appalachian Herbs podcast, who also podcasts on the Prepper Broadcasting Network, lives in western North Carolina. Lucky to have intermittent internet service, he has provided us with a first-hand account of what's happening there.
Hey, y'all. I just want to give you an update on what's going on with hurricane recovery here in western North Carolina. As most of y'all know, if you've listened to my show before or heard me speak before, I live in the mountains of North Carolina in Avery County. Very rural, very small county. We got hit really hard, okay? According to the state NCDOT site, all roads in western North Carolina are closed. All roads. That means you can get to the foothills, you can't go any further. The power came on at my house yesterday, so we were almost a week without power. And that's only because there's a new substation they built maybe 2 miles from my house that also serves the county hospital. So that's the only reason, I'm one of the only people in the entire county that has power. So I'm able to do this today. Almost all cell towers are down. I can maybe get 1 or 2 bars if I need to send somebody a text. That's it. I finally was able to speak with somebody with the county emergency management yesterday afternoon, and you could tell this person's just shell-shocked. And he said the National Guard just got on the ground yesterday, so nearly a week later. And their focus is recovering bodies. They're also closing roads. We'll get into that in just a minute. The numbers you're seeing on television of the dead in western North Carolina are ridiculous. I mean, they're saying 160 people dead, and then they'll say, but, that number's going to rise. Yeah, that number's going to rise. There are entire towns that are gone. If they report things accurately, there are thousands dead here in western North Carolina, especially in the remote towns. We have these small valleys that are called hollers. They're very steep little cuts kind of in the mountain. Anybody that lives in one of those, their house is gone. The last bad hurricane flooding we got was from Katrina, and then the tropical storm that came right after it, left New Orleans and went right over us in the mountains of North Carolina. The rivers, I think, rose 12 feet. It was very bad flooding. I mean, it was really awful. This time, last I saw, the river had risen over 30 feet. Now, I mean, this is not, you cannot prepare for this. I mean, I was as prepared as I could be. I grew up this way. Food stored, water stored, kerosene, firewood. I can get through just about anything with a pot of soup and wait it out. People on any kind of medical device, older people with young children. This is absolutely devastating. Absolutely, and it's not being reported. Truthfully, Joe Biden doesn't care a thing about western North Carolina, even though Asheville and Boone are very liberal college towns, okay? We don't vote Democrat in North Carolina, and he doesn't care about us. He doesn't care about South Carolina. He doesn't care about Georgia. He doesn't care about Florida. I mean, he gives a little lip service. And our very corrupt Democrat governor doesn't care at all about western North Carolina either, okay? And our news is all entirely mainstream liberal news. You're not getting the truth. So I want to just kind of tell you what's going on. First of all, when I say the disaster, I mean, this is devastating. I mean, entire towns are gone. Neighborhoods are gone. Houses floated away down the river. On the street outside, if I walk down to the main highway, cars are buried in mud and turned upside down, propped up against trees and such. That's how high the water was, and that's how fast it was. As the water went down the mountain to, I'm about almost 5,000 feet, right? As the water went down to lower communities, devastation like you cannot imagine. One of the first things I got was a message from Forrest Garvin. He owns several businesses. He grew up in Spruce Pine. His family owned the hardware store. Spruce Pine is a small community in Mitchell County. The road in front of my house leads to Spruce Pine. Okay, so this is one of those areas you're not hearing about. By Thursday, the entire town was underwater. I mean, the water was up to roof level. Okay. He said a classmate of his had gotten in touch, and he said things are really bad. He says, as a native of Spruce Pine, I want to let you know that we're organizing 4 or 5 teams to provide for the area. If anyone's interested in going, please let me know. They're in desperate need of help. There's absolutely nothing left. And another friend in that area, I think she's more in Bakersville or Burnsville, has been putting up pictures. I'm going to give you her Twitter handle here in a minute so you can see what we're talking about. These towns are gone. They're digging bodies out of the mud. But this is as of Thursday. He sent this email. It could have been Friday morning, okay? He said, if you plan to visit for any reason, wear full battle gear and protection with AR-15s. You must treat this like a war zone. We are getting bad reports about looting and random stops on roads by, he said vigilantes. He means basically highway robbers. It was already that bad. So when the National Guard came in, and like I said, they just got to my county yesterday, first thing they did was start closing roads. They're trying to help out, okay? The National Guard's doing their best. They're trying to clean up the roads. They're trying to get access to for people to food and hospitals. But the looting started, and the violence started very quickly in many communities. Yesterday, listened to the radio, and they said, people are trying to get supplies up from the foothills to the mountains, and they're being stopped and turned away. And people are getting frustrated that they can't help. Well, it's so bad that somebody was trying to bring insulin to somebody up there, and they were blocked. National Guard wouldn't let them up the mountain. They actually got mules, pack mules, and took insulin to the person that needed it. This is like a war zone. I mean, it's really the worst I have ever seen. It's unbelievable. This is utter devastation. Right now, the only way you're going to get news on what's going on in these counties, especially the small towns, the rural communities, is Twitter and Facebook. Actually, the guy with the county said, that's the way we're informing people. And I said, well, what if you can't get on Facebook? Well, you don't know. By the way, Tennessee got hit. Roan Mountain, the community of Roan Mountain, just across the state line from me, is gone. It's gone. The brick elementary school, gone. Everything's just destroyed. Watauga Lake, I spoke with a girl who has, her father lives there. She just built a cabin. They are under the lake now. You've probably seen pictures of Lake Lure and Chimney Rock, gone. So do not believe them when they say 160 people are dead. People we're getting close to starvation. That's what's happening right now. Samaritan's Purse in Boone seems to be doing the best, okay? They have helicopters. They are dropping food and water to people. Like a lot of people have been saying, they're getting no help from any government agency, and I know the local guys are doing their best. I mean, the power crews, the emergency management folks, the cops, they are not sleeping a week. They're out working as hard as they can. Everybody's got a chainsaws out trying to clear roads. Everybody's got a shovels out trying to clear. It's not their fault. Federal government is not helping. President Trump is working with Elon Musk. They're getting Starlink communications up in every county. The government's really making... They're needed. You heard my message from Forrest Garvin, but in many ways they're making things very difficult for us right now. And they're not exactly interested in hearing your story of why you need to go somewhere. They're just saying, turn around or you'll be shot. What you're seeing on TV is not the full story. They're digging bodies out of the mud, just, all over. And there are a lot of people that we're going to have an epidemic of homelessness up here, and people are going to have to leave generations-old family farms. And then I'm sure the big investment brokers The big banks and investors and builders are going to come in and buy everything up and sell million-dollar vacation homes. Property taxes are going to go up even higher. We have some of the highest property taxes in the entire state when the 70 people in my community basically live in shacks. This is one of the poorest regions of North Carolina, and they've just lost everything.
I want you to keep something in mind as you digest that report. Just as with the disaster that wiped Lahaina on the island of Maui in Hawaii from recognizable existence, the federal government is doing very little to help American citizens during the natural disaster in Appalachia. Shockingly, and this is entirely unacceptable, the Biden administration has misappropriated FEMA funds to provide taxpayer dollars for benefits for illegal immigrants. Over $1 billion intended for disaster relief through FEMA was redirected towards providing services for immigrants, including those who entered illegally, with nearly $364 million in 2023 and $650 million in 2024 going towards the Shelter and Services Program aimed at non-citizen migrants released by DHS. A recent report highlighted an annual net cost of $150.7 billion due to illegal immigration, encompassing various expenditures like emergency medical care, incarceration, and welfare. Various reports mention monthly stipends ranging from $1,200 to $1,912, while the costs to U.S. taxpayers, including those in North Carolina and Hawaii, for housing and medical treatment aren't directly qualifiable into a per-person, per-month figure. Additionally, the U.S. federal government, and this must be laid at the feet of both parties, the deep state globalist uniparty, the U.S. federal government has issued taxpayer dollars in the area of $70 billion to Ukraine, with a projection of at least $174 billion being sent to that nation without a caveat for accountability by September 2024. So what is the Biden administration doing for those affected by Hurricane Helene? Not much. A statement issued by the White House proclaims, FEMA assistance in Florida, North Carolina, and South Carolina may include a one-time $750 payment to help with essential items like food, water, baby formula, and other emergency supplies. That's a far cry from what the Biden-Harris administration is affording illegal immigrants who broke the law to exist in our country at the very start. To add insult to injury, and in the wake of the Biden-Harris administration's grotesquely irresponsible spending on non-critical special interests, impeached DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas issued a statement saying FEMA doesn't have the funds to execute its mission.
We are meeting the immediate needs with the money that we have. We are expecting another hurricane hitting. We do not have the funds. FEMA does not have the funds to make it through the season.
This is absolutely unacceptable, and the entirety of the blame must, without question, without argument, without excuse, be laid at the spendthrift feet of Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and the sickeningly opportunistic Democrat and Uniparty deep state leadership in Congress. How dare they raid emergency aid funds to provide politically motivated funding for non-citizens while taxpayers, American citizens, exist in immediate need. This goes for those affected by the hurricane, those in Hawaii, our military veterans and first responders, and our homeless. The far left in the United States has lost its way. They are compassionate only when it serves their ideology and fuck everybody else. They've become hate-filled, obstinate monsters who must be removed from control of government. And that goes for the placed operatives in the deep state bureaucracy as well as those in elected office. Tone down the rhetoric? Absolutely not. Not while people are being pulled alive out of the mud in North Carolina. Not while survivors in Lahaina are being denied answers to their questions and well-deserved aid to rebuild. Not while one military veteran or disabled first responder exists in need. I will not tone down the rhetoric, and in fact, I urge everyone to be outraged along with me. We must put our country, our citizens, and our neighbors first before we extend international benevolence. To help those in immediate need in Appalachia, please consider donating to one of two reputable organizations that consistently step up in times like this: Samaritan's Purse, based out of North Carolina, and the Salvation Army, a Catholic charity that always shows up. Links to both are on this podcast's webpage. When we come back, our segment on America's Third Watch, broadcast nationally from our flagship station WGUL AM 930 and FM 93.7 in Tampa, Florida. Prayers to the people who are affected by this. They are our neighbors.
You're listening to Underground USA.
When a government restricts the free speech of its people, it disrupts freedom and societal function, casting a shadow over the democratic process and the diversity of ideas. Free speech restrictions lead to countries where only certain viewpoints are heard. They stifle opposition and reduce the democratic process to a disingenuous formality. When people fear repercussions for their speech, they self-censor. This doesn't just limit controversial or offensive speech, but also destroys innovation, creativity, and even necessary discourse. Over time, this leads to a homogenization of thought, where only safe or approved ideas are expressed. And suppressing speech doesn't eliminate the underlying issues or beliefs, but drives them underground. Governments that curtail free speech do so to maintain control. When speech is controlled, it's easier for those in power to manipulate narratives, suppress dissent, and maintain their grip on power. That's why, when Kamala Harris says this, we should all be alarmed.
There has to be a responsibility that is placed on these social media sites to understand their power. They are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation. And that has to stop.
Any government's fascist restriction of free speech sets off a domino effect where freedom incrementally disappears. It's a foundational right that supports the structure of all other liberties, and its restriction can lead to a society where control overshadows freedom. And that appears to be quite all right with far-left Democrats, the DNC, and the Harris campaign. They're not saying it, but your right to free speech is on the ballot this November. Vote accordingly.
Who helped cause soaring gas prices? BlackRock. Who contributed to outrageous housing prices? BlackRock. BlackRock and Larry Fink spent years harassing oil and gas companies, making them divest from fossil fuels. Now you feel the pain. And BlackRock-owned companies are snatching up houses, crippling families. Now BlackRock's former ESG czar, Brian Deese, is Biden's economic advisor, crushing America from within. That's what BlackRock is really about.
The federal government is becoming more centralized by the day. Opportunistic politicians are centralizing power in Washington, D.C., and incrementally whittling away at our rights. Should the worst-case scenario play out and Kamala Harris and Obama 3.0 assume power on November 5th, we must be prepared with a plan to rein in the Marxism they will unleash through the federal government. Nullification, the case for decentralizing the federal government by Frank Salato, lays out a plan in which the state governments can claw back their sovereignty from the overreach of the federal government, saving us from a second bloody civil war. Arm yourself with the knowledge of this nation-saving option. Get your copy of Nullification, the case for decentralizing the federal government, available on Amazon.com in Kindle form and paperback.
News, insight, passion. AM 930, The Answer.
Well, I'll tell you, I'm sure you've been following this, Frank, about this FEMA money. Alejandro Mayorkas saying, well, we don't have all the money we need, and it's gone to immigrant issues and so forth, for lack of a better term. This should be shocking to all Americans. I mean, this should be outrageous to all Americans.
Well, it should be criminal. It's called a misallocation of funds.
Yep.
In the private sector, the IRS would be all over you. They wouldn't. You'd be in trouble. And the federal government does this on a daily basis with many different pots of funding that they're supposed to leave alone for dedicated purposes, and the chief among them is Social Security. There's nothing in Social Security. There's zero in that account because Congress passed a law that allows them to borrow against it. That's the legislative branch's fault. The executive branch is purely at fault for this one in raiding what is and should be reserved for emergencies for the American citizens. Now it's not there. We've got another hurricane brewing, whether it's even if it's minor, the money's not there for what FEMA needs to do to execute its duties. This is scandalous. This should end any question about the election.
Right. I agree.
There really shouldn't be. You have American citizens, and I've got a friend of mine who I had contact with in the western part of North Carolina who says, the media is not telling you what's really happening here. He said they talk about hundreds of people dead. He goes, how about thousands? They're pulling dead bodies out of the mud there. And you can't get in and you can't get out. The National Guard doing what they should be doing is securing the area so people who are trying to help their neighbors can't move freely around there. Everything's under lockdown. So, I mean, it is a disaster of epic proportions. And the fact that you have some immigrants by reports, some reports have it at $1,200, other reports have it at $2,000 to $3,000 in stipends for people who are here illegally in this country. And when you factor in health care and housing and things like that, it's more than that you can be a non-citizen and get that kind of response from our federal government. And our president says, well, we're going to get you $750 electronically deposited into your bank account that you can't access because there's no power.
There's no power, and you probably don't have your card or even your phone or anything that you would use to access that account. Yeah, this is above the travesty, and Frank, of course, this whole problem. If the money went to illegal immigrants, that was a preventable problem by border czar Kamala Harris, let's say. I mean, if we didn't have this open border problem to begin with, they wouldn't have had to spend money on immigrants, or illegal immigrants.
Exactly. And for her to try to run away from this at this point, or try to not address the issue, avoid addressing the issue, to not answer questions and pointed questions at that, about why this had to happen because they had to make a political statement about open borders, this should sink her campaign. It should anyway. It should sink the campaign, but the mainstream media is not going to ask the question. They're just not. Oh, and by the way, the $750 that's being electronically deposited in 10 days to the people who can't access it because they don't have electricity, you can bet your ass that they're going to require ID from those people to access that money at the bank, but they won't need an ID to vote in the upcoming election.
Yeah. Well, that's exactly it. And it's to say it's ironic would be an understatement, but no, see, that's exactly it. And in order to do anything, you have to be able to show some kind of identification or that you're eligible to receive that or eligible to vote. And this is where the left has really done a number on us, Frank. This is why. I mean, nobody can be disenfranchised. Well, nobody wants anybody to be disenfranchised. But at the same time, how about borrowing one of their phrases? How about reasonable voting laws?
Well, and here we go. Mayorkas was asked about this at the press conference yesterday. Well, how about these people for the election? How are they going to be served by being allowed to vote? And you know what? This representative of an administration that wants to take over control of the federal election said, "Oh, that's a state issue."
So it's a mischaracterization of Kamala Harris to say she was against fracking. We're just trying to scare people.
Well, this is her game plan. She's got to run away from what she said. She's got to run away from everything that she is in order to paint herself as some kind of moderate. It's what Joe Biden did. It's the same game plan as last time. You know, it's what Joe, remember, he was just good old Joe from Scranton.
Yeah, Scranton Joe.
But when you looked at his record, he was as far left as you can get throughout his entire career. So Kamala Harris doesn't want you looking at her record going all the way back to San Francisco, because when you do, you realize that she is a San Francisco progressive liberal. She's of the same cloth as Nancy Pelosi and Gavin Newsom. She helped to destroy San Francisco and the state of California along with Gavin Newsom, and she wants to do the same thing to the entirety of the nation. You know, she in 2019, she was asked point blank at a town hall if she would ban fracking, and she said absolutely she would ban fracking. And then asked during the debate, would you ban fracking? No, I wouldn't. Or I guess it was an interview on CNN. No, absolutely not. I wasn't for it then. I'm not for it now, and I won't be for it in the future. Well, let's ask a question. Were you lying then, or are you lying now? And yeah, obviously you lied one of these two times, so I can't trust you.
Yeah, well, you know, and in fact, if I recall correctly, Frank, she tied fracking into the existential threat of climate change. And so this was one of the primary reasons she was against fracking. But now, according to Governor Josh Shapiro, she's listened and she's learned from the people of Pennsylvania and realizes now that she can be pro-fracking and it's all fine.
Well, and that should throw Josh Shapiro into the suspect pool.
Yeah.
If you're a voter in Pennsylvania, your governor just lied to you straight to your face.
Yep.
And in campaigning for a full-blown and certifiable Marxist. So if you're a voter in Pennsylvania, you've got to be completely disillusioned with your governor, who was supposed to be the next best thing to mediocre milquetoast, middle of the road sliced bread.
Yep. Indeed.
You know, when did truth become optional? And I'm not exclusively laying this at the feet of people in only the Democrat Party, because we have our share of charlatans on the right. Mm-hmm. They're members of the Uniparty, members of the deep state status quo inside the Beltway crowd, like, oh, I don't know, Liz Cheney,
yep,
Adam Kitzinger, those malcontents, those miscreants. You know, when did lying become, well, it's just what we've always done in politics.
Yeah. Well, you bring up a really good point. You know, Liz Cheney, I'm not so sure about, but Dick Cheney, why would you think that Dick Cheney would ever actually vote for real for Kamala Harris? I mean, you know, if not for this uniparty kind of mentality, it just seems like, I don't know how any true conservative would ever say, well, Kamala Harris is the better choice here because Donald Trump is going to be a dictator on day one, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't make any sense at all.
Dick Cheney, and I've met the man back in the day, is a huge disappointment to me in his outing himself as someone who's endorsing. I don't know if he'll vote for Kamala Harris, but he endorsed her, and that means something. As Barack Obama said, words matter.
Yeah,
you know. So he outed himself. It's about, we've got to maintain the status quo. The status quo is not working for the average American. It's just not. The economy is in shambles. We're at the cusp of World War III, And we've got a sizable portion of our electorate that can't define what a woman is. It's not working for the average American who goes to work every day, who's trying to scrap to just get by and make ends meet, who now can't afford to buy a house, who has trouble putting groceries on the table. You know, right now, there's not a lot of people in the real world who give a damn about pronouns. They just want to be able to make ends meet.
Yeah.
And for people to be pushing Kamala Harris with what she wants to do, even in unrealized capital gains and taxing that, do you know what that would do to the economy? It means your house, if they decided to appraise it at a higher value every year, would cost you taxes whether you made money on it or not.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
You know,
that's a Armageddon kind of a scenario.
Absolutely it is.
Yeah.
And this is where the mainstream media and the political left, their lust for power, their need to attain power at all costs, no matter what you have to say, whether it's true or not to get there, we can't tolerate that anymore. And when you're catering to globalism by raiding funds for FEMA to give it to people who aren't even citizens of the United States in largesse to the tune of $1 billion over the last 2 years, and now you have Americans in need who are dying by the thousands, I might add, in places like North Carolina and Georgia and eastern Tennessee, and you're the Secretary of the Department of Homeland Security, and you say, well, you know, another hurricane's coming, but I don't think we'll have any money to do anything about it. That's too bad.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, let's get the next airplane in here from Guatemala so we can give them EBT cards and put them on welfare. Yeah. It's not working for us.
No, it's not. And certainly, you know, again, this whole problem could have been avoided. We all know that, but it seems to me, Frank, that they would say to themselves, you know, and I'm not trying to be flip, but they're saying to themselves, the plan is working. You know, we are completely destabilizing the United States. We're going to remake it into the image that we want, and it looks nothing like what Kamala Harris was talking about with her campaign stop with Liz Cheney, saying she wants to uphold the Constitution and she'll do it, but Donald Trump won't. It's a more just, you know what, coming from Kamala Harris.
This goes all the way back to Senator Fulbright, back when Barry Goldwater was running for president. They were saying then that the Constitution was too restrictive and needed to be looked at as a list of suggestions rather than what they needed to have in place so that they could run government the way they saw fit for you. I don't need the government to live my life for me. I want the government out of my life. I want it not telling me what to do, what I can build, what I can't build, you know, where I can travel. But when I'm paying tax dollars every single year into the federal pot, and a storm washes away my town, I expect there to be funding there that's my tax dollars coming back to me.
Yep.
So that I can actually continue to live. The government's number one job is to take care of their citizens, the security and the safety of their citizens, job one. And this administration has failed so miserably, there's not a description for it.
Yeah, no, you're right about that, Frank. And again, you know what you're talking about. I hate to say to the Democrat Party elite and the far left elite, you know, all that is pretty subversive, and you know you got to be careful. You'll wind up on some kind of list, you know, for saying you expect the federal government to do its job, that kind of stuff.
Well, they've already made my list. They're useless. And they're harming the American people.
Well, you know, Frank, hopefully we get to be unburdened of Kamala Harris after Donald Trump wins the election. But certainly Kamala Harris is out there right now she's really harping on this January 6th narrative that the left or the Democrat Party elite tell. Donald Trump sent an angry armed mob to the Capitol to overthrow the government or something like that. And it tells me that, I think they're a little more desperate than we probably know in terms of where they really think they are in this election. What do you think?
Well, according to some people who have the wherewithal to understand what's happening inside the campaign, I believe it's one elected official from Michigan let it slip that the internals don't look good.
Yeah.
The internal pollsters for Kamala Harris are a little worried. So that's why you're hearing a lot about the false narrative of January 6th. That has been debunked so many times and in so many ways with so much evidence that anybody who still falls for the January 6th thing is probably a very low IQ voter.
Well,
that's just the case. There's evidence that exists on social media. There's evidence that exists on YouTube. There's evidence that exists in the news files that they don't show you. And there was evidence that exists that the January 6th committee literally erased from the video that it subpoenaed and took possession of from the Capitol. So it's anybody who's still falling for that, or the Charlottesville good people on both sides,
right.
Abbreviated, edited statement that the left likes to trot out. People, you have got to get deeper into the truth, because they're playing you like a $2 fiddle.
No kidding. Well, and Hillary Clinton's gotten in the mix. She's saying that something's going to happen this month in October that she believes will distort and pervert Kamala Harris, or the perception that people have of her. And my thought, Frank, is that she's already been distorted and perverted because they made her, go out and say the exact opposite of everything that she's ever, every policy, quote unquote, she's ever had, every position. And they've had to distort her to try to make her the top of the ticket.
The fact that anybody's still listening to Hillary Clinton after what she pulled during her career is stunning to me. This is a woman who got on the air and said that there should be criminal penalties and penalties exacted against people for exercising free speech in the United States. That can't be. This is a woman who, when told by the Justice Department, when it wasn't fully politicized like it is today with Merrick Garland, to preserve the evidence on her server, to preserve 32,000 emails, immediately went and scrubbed it and destroyed any way that it could be recalled from the hard drive. She's a dishonest, flagrantly dishonest woman who would do anything for power. She's a Marxist. She's an Alinskyite. She shouldn't be trusted, and thank God she didn't win in 2016, because this country wouldn't be recognizable.
No, you're right about that. You're exactly right about that, and certainly, Kamala Harris, again, she did have to morph into to be at the top of the ticket, and and they keep trying to hide this. They keep trying to pretend like, no, that didn't happen. No, this has always been Kamala Harris. She's always been like this, or you're a fool to ask anything different. But and you mentioned about free speech, Frank, as well. And John Kerry just recently was quoted as saying that the First Amendment is a big block to being able to hammer out disinformation sources that I guess they don't like or what. And it's that quote didn't come off too good, in my opinion.
No, it didn't. And people should be outraged at it. Outraged that he says the First Amendment is a stumbling block to dealing with disinformation. The only way that you combat disinformation is with the disinfectant of transparency. If you believe something is disinformation, then you bring forward the facts that prove it to be disinformation, and you do it in broad daylight. You don't say, well, you can't say that. That's what the First Amendment is all about. Yeah. Transparency and truth. So you don't combat misinformation or disinformation with censorship. You combat it with more free speech. And anybody who's trying to stifle free speech has got something to hide, a hidden agenda, and they usually do it so they can control people. And in a free country, we shouldn't have people in the political and the governmental sphere who want to control you. They're supposed to serve you.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, Frank, I also wanted to ask you about, we have the International Association of Firefighters. They are not going to be endorsing Kamala Harris. They're not endorsing Trump, but they did endorse Biden back in 2020. So what's going on with these union members? Or, for example, a lot of people now the Teamsters leadership, they're one thing, but it seems like a lot of the Teamsters rank and file are not for Kamala. Maybe the same thing here with the International Association of Firefighters.
Absolutely. This is a detachment of leadership, union leadership from the rank and file. Rank and file firefighters, and I know a few. Mm-hmm. They are not supporting Kamala Harris. They're just not, because they need to make ends meet too. Now, the hierarchy in the unions, they've still got a seat at Kamala Harris's table. They don't want to destroy that by endorsing Donald Trump, but they can't, in all good conscience, endorse Kamala Harris. So that needs to be seen as an ipso facto endorsement for Donald Trump, both the Teamsters and the firefighters.
Yeah, and this is spelling doom for the Kamala Harris campaign. I mean, their bread and butter is, having this, almost ironclad union support and this kind of thing, and they really can't make those claims anymore. And honestly, they've not delivered for unions or for the rank and file.
They've got a problem with their get out the vote campaign, because that's what the unions used to do for them.
Yeah.
And that's why the internals for Harris, I guess you could call it.
I like that. Yeah, it's cool.
Oh yeah. Why the internals for Kamala Harris do not look good, because they're not going to be able to get out the vote. And to bring this full circle back to North Carolina, you can bet your butt that Kamala Harris is going, well, most of the counties that are affected by this hurricane in North Carolina and Eastern, well, they vote red. Yeah. Except for Winston-Salem, they all vote red. So,
Well,
I'm going to stay in Los Angeles and eat my Chateaubriand with my glitterati, instead of rushing to where I should be to be able to experience the pain that these people are feeling.
Yeah, it is. This is years. I mean, we're looking at this devastation, and this is years of rebuilding, it seems, and billions of dollars. And, it is just a real travesty that everything that could be done is not being done. And it's at the behest of this administration. And it's shocking, sad, and as you were saying before, it's even criminal that money has just been deflected to other uses.
Kyle, there are some towns in western North Carolina and eastern Tennessee that won't come back. They're gone. They're gone for good. And when you look at the 48-hour response that George W. Bush had going into Katrina,
yeah,
this response by the Biden administration should find the media screaming from the rooftops, just like they did against George W. Bush, because he was down there looking at the devastation within 48 hours. These people still haven't shown up, as far as I'm concerned. If you like the podcast, please go over to undergroundusa.com and subscribe. It brings new podcasts and articles directly into your inbox, circumventing the censors and the fact checkers of social media, who pretty much are censors anyway. And please remember to talk politics, religion, and current events with your friends, families, colleagues, and acquaintances. That's how we find out we've got more in common than indifference, and that's how we neuter the opportunistic politicians who seek to rule our lives. And don't forget to give to Samaritan's Purse or the Salvation Army for those in need in Appalachia, especially in North Carolina. it's important to help our neighbors. You're listening to Underground USA. No fear, no political correctness, and no wokeness. My name is Frank Salvato.